So I've never heard of this red pill philosophy guy before, which is kind of surprising. Let's check out what's going on his channel.
Our universe spontaneously came into being from nothing, and it makes it plausible without supernatural shenanigans.
But isn't something out of nothing supernatural shenanigans?
No!
But isn't something out of nothing supernatural shenanigans?
No!
But isn't something out of nothing supernatural shenanigans?
No!
Okay, so we start off with a clip of Joe Rogan not understanding what the word supernatural means, presented entirely without context. I'll come back to this and look at what Krauss and Rogan were really discussing, but let's first get into Red Pill's response. It seems his name is Chris, so I'll call him that, I guess.
You are a fucking miracle.
Oh, thank you, that's very flattering.
Let's just be real.
Okay, I'll be real. Just stop yelling at me.
Lawrence Krauss, a pop science pushing atheist, was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently, and he basically admitted that we're a fucking miracle.
Listen, I'm glad you're excited, but seriously, can you stop screaming into my ear? I'm wearing headphones here, and your audio's jacked up so high it's spiking. Now, first thing, his last name is pronounced Krauss. I'll probably pronounce it more like Krauss throughout this video because I'm fucking Canadian. I'm going out in my boat about 7, so it's kind of hard for me to make the ow thing that Americans do, but that's what it is, just to clear that up for you. Although, to be fair, Joe Rogan already did at the beginning of the podcast you supposedly listened to, but no worries, it happens to the best of us. I'm not here to criticize you for that. Now, I think it's best if I clarify what Krauss actually said here at the start, so that there's no confusion as we go along. He said nothing at all about people being miracles, nor did he say anything about the universe as a whole being a miracle, and not even your best attempt to select a clip of him talking could make it seem like he did. A miracle is a case of the supernatural circumventing or ignoring the workings of nature and causing something. It's a case of supernatural causation. And the only person who mentioned the word supernatural there, or in any way implied that this circumvents how nature works, was a somewhat confused Joe Rogan, who, let me be clear, is not the same person as Lawrence Krauss. Now, Krauss was not talking about anything supernatural, but in fact, only that which is solidly grounded in our current understanding of the natural. Which is why, when he wrote a book on this subject that denied the need for deistic creation or supernatural causation, it was a big seller among atheists. Now, the very first thing he did was point out that we don't actually know what was happening before the Big Bang. And that alone completely shreds your assertion that he admitted that we or the universe are something. He made no claim about what we are. He made a claim that here's an idea that does not contradict the laws of physics. The known laws of physics, I should say. He didn't make any assertions at all about what's true or false, but only about what's plausible.
The point is the simple answer is we don't know.
Right.
Because at the instant of the Big Bang, the whole universe was contained in a region where you'd have to understand gravity as a quantum mechanical force to really understand what was happening. And we don't have a quantum theory of gravity.
He then went on to discuss the fact that based on all of our current knowledge of physics, it's plausible that the total energy of the universe could be zero, thus allowing the universe as we know it to come into being without violating energy conservation, because there is no energy.
Once you realize the total energy of the universe can be zero, then the possibility that it comes from nothing becomes plausible. Because if it doesn't, you may need a deity to create everything. But it turns out you can create 100 billion galaxies, each containing 100 billion stars, without violating energy conservation.
He's very careful to make sure to point out that we don't know that this is what happened, but just that it's plausible based on currently known physics.
And it's amazing that that's possible. Now, can we prove that that happened? No. But everything we can point to makes it plausible.
So out the window goes your insistence that Krauss says anything about what the universe is. Sorry, dude, but saying it's plausible based on known physics, but we have no idea if it's actually true, does not mean the same thing as this is what happened. It doesn't even mean the same thing as this is the only idea we have. There's plenty of other ideas. So no, Krauss does not admit, or in fact even state, anything about how the universe came into existence, let alone call it a miracle. And then he goes on to ask what a universe would look like today if it arose spontaneously from nothing based solely on known or plausible laws of physics. So in other words, he shoots down any claim that this is supernatural, and thus any claim that it's miraculous, because if it's based on known laws of physics, which are simply a description of how the natural world works, then it's by definition not supernatural. Mind-blowing, sure. Strange seeming to someone on Earth with our limited perspective and our limited understanding. But that's not the same thing as supernatural.
What would a universe look like today that was created, that arose spontaneously from nothing 13.8 billion years ago, just by known laws of physics, or at least plausible laws of physics?
And he says that a universe that arose from nothing based on known laws of physics would look just like the universe we live in, which is why the idea is plausible.
What would it look like today if that was the requirement? And the answer is it would look just like the universe in which we live in.
And then, once again, he takes great care to point out that we don't know that this is what happened, but that it's just a plausible idea. It's not impossible, nor does it require a revolution in our understanding of physics. And since it's all perfectly natural, based on known physics, it doesn't require anything supernatural to make it plausible.
Now, does that prove that that's what happened? No, but it makes it plausible. And it makes it plausible without supernatural shenanigans.
And then, in classic Krauss fashion, he points out that if you can get rid of God, it's a good thing. Most likely because God did it is just not a compelling theory of anything, since God, being undemonstrated and totally unexplained, but rather the explanatory equivalent of a shrug, can't possibly function as a useful explanation for anything.
And any time you can get rid of God, it's a good thing.
And then, having not understood any of this, Joe Rogan asks if something out of nothing is actually supernatural shenanigans.
But isn't something out of nothing supernatural shenanigans?
No!
And apparently you didn't understand any of this either, since you severely misrepresented the entire conversation, as is going to become abundantly clear as we proceed. And so instead of trying to understand what Krauss was actually saying, you just decided to simply cut most of it out, and then instead make a video about Joe Rogan's ignorant question. And I don't mean that as an insult to Joe. I mean, he seems like a nice guy who tries to understand stuff, and everybody's ignorant about most things. There's nothing wrong with honest ignorance. Anyway, let's clear up the rest of the conversation before we move ahead here. So, Krauss then uses the example of a photon being emitted from an atom spontaneously transitioning to a lower energy state, and how this means photons are coming from nothing when you turn on a light bulb, as a more relatable example of the sort of creation from nothing that he's referring to with regard to the universe.
They're spontaneously created because there's no cause for any of them. Each atom spontaneously decays into a different level because quantum mechanics says that these things can happen spontaneously. And when it does, a photon is created from nothing.
And finally, he explains why causality would probably have no applicability before the universe anyway, at least if our universe is all there is, which, as he points out, not everyone considers likely anymore. But if it is, then space-time began with the universe. And so there was no before the universe. There was no time. And without time, the notion of cause and effect makes no sense.
And if there's no before, then all of our notions of causality go out the window because we all depend on before and after to decide causes and effects.
Right.
But if there was no before, then we have to change our notions of a cause and effect. And that's awful, but hey, that's what we call learning.
That's all I'm going to review from the Krauss-Rogan discussion. Now, let's see what else you have to say, and I'm sure we'll refer back to the reality of that conversation quite often here.
He basically admitted, a scientist admitted, that our universe is a miracle.
Not even remotely, like I said. Joe Rogan said he thought that what Krauss said sounded supernatural, but we're not concerned with Joe's misrepresentations here. We're interested in what the scientist actually said. And what he said was that a zero-energy universe from nothing could occur naturally based on known physics. Not that it did, nor that it requires supernatural intervention. As a matter of fact, an uncaused universe is no more caused by the supernatural than it is by the natural, because those are both causes. But let me ask you something. If Krauss really did come out and say, look, Joe, physicalism is false. A causaless origin is totally supernatural, and, I don't know, universe was created by ghosts. What would that mean to you? Would it mean that that's absolutely true because one scientist said it? You seem to take his word as gospel here. So what if he said, the only possibility is that I conjured this universe by reading the Necronomicon as I floated in the void last Friday? Would that mean it's true? Would that excite you? Because based on this video, it doesn't seem as though you're gloating because you think you've got Lawrence Krauss on your side. You're gloating because you think you've got any scientist on your side. Because apparently, for some reason, you think that gives your ideas credibility. Well, sorry, but Krauss is not on your side, and if he were, and he were spouting complete and total nonsense, well, using just one scientist to create an argument from authority in favor of miracles really is just not that impressive. Now, I understand perfectly well that he's not the only scientist who thinks this way. But the point is, judging by your reaction, this is the first time you've heard any scientist saying this. You have no idea how many physicists accept this as plausible versus any other version of the origin of the universe. But because this one guy said it, you're flipping your lid about it. You know, maybe try to get some perspective on how much authority Lawrence Krauss really has, is all I'm saying. Maybe sort of take a look around and see what the consensus is on which hypothesis is the most plausible these days. Something like that. That's all I'm saying.
Because, and I know now I have to get technical, I wanted to just be passionate and rant.
Well, shit, man, you've been doing a great job of that so far. Don't give up now.
In fact, you know what? I'm just going to be passionate. I'm not going to supply the scientific background for my claim that our universe is a miracle in this video.
Oh, come on. You can do both. We're all on the edges of our seats waiting to hear all of your incredible scientific expertise.
But I will do it in another video, which I'll put a link right up here if you want to get the scientific reasoning.
Aw, man. Can't you do it here? You'd really rather just make this video an unhinged rant with no reasoning at all? Well, I might take a look at the other one after this if I get in the mood. I'm sorta curious to hear the scientific reasoning that supports your claim that Lawrence Krauss called the universe a miracle in that video, despite my having already clearly established that he did no such thing whatsoever. By the way, I have scientific reasoning that in this video, you said we're not miracles. I'm not gonna present it here, but trust me, I have the best scientific reasoning to prove people said things they never said.
For now, I'm just going to fucking rant about the fact that mainstream science now admits we are a fucking miracle!
Oh, now it's mainstream science. Man, 2 seconds ago it was Lawrence Krauss you were excited about getting on your side, and now it's all of mainstream science. Fascinating. Okay, pal, listen. If it'll make you stop screaming and howling into the microphone, I'll totally, for super reals, admit that the statement, X is a plausible natural explanation based on known and plausible laws of physics, is precisely equivalent to X is entirely supernatural and definitely happened and we're all miracles. Yeah, I will definitely, totally do that. Every single natural explanation is a miracle. Quantum physics is a fucking miracle, man. It's not just kinda old, but comparatively new, interesting science based entirely in the physical and the natural. It's fucking God reaching down and stirring things up with his pinky finger.
And I don't want to talk to a scientist. Y'all motherfuckers lying and getting me pissed.
You know, the same science that for so many decades tried to say that miracles are impossible. We live in a purely predeterministic, mechanistic, causal reality.
The advent of quantum mechanics already caused some serious differences in interpretation over the concept of determinism quite a few decades before you were born. So if you're just realizing this now, you've kind of taken your sweet-ass time coming to this realization. And science is not in the business of saying things are impossible, except maybe according to particular models, which is not a statement of absolute impossibility, but rather about apparent probability, since it's never certain that a model is not going to change or be replaced based on new evidence or better explanations. No, science is more about whether things are probable, or demonstrable, or even theoretically plausible. And the proponents of miracles, such as Jesus curing that blind dude in the Bible, have done a truly piss-poor job of demonstrating them, or providing any reason for us to think they're probably real. And pointing your finger at quantum mechanics and saying, hey, that exists, therefore Jesus did stuff, is not good enough.
Where everything can be explained by its cause and effect relationships, and if anything ever happened without a prior cause, that's called a miracle or supernatural.
Really? Who? When? I've never heard anyone say this at all, and frankly, if just some asshole said it, I don't really care. It doesn't change the fact that the word miracle does not refer to something happening without a cause. It refers to something acting in a way that is not according to the laws of nature and which is caused by something non-natural. Supernatural causation and non-causation are not the same thing. An uncaused event does not have supernatural causation. It also doesn't have natural causation. It just is. And if within the laws of nature there's room for causeless events to happen, well fine, no problem. There's no causation, so there's no natural causation, but that doesn't mean that they're not natural, because they're allowed by the laws of nature. They don't require supernatural causation. Now, as far as these people who insisted that anything that happens without a cause is a miracle, again, I have no idea who you're talking about, but I really hope you're not talking about early 20th century scientists or even earlier ones who had no idea that quantum physics was a thing, because that would mean that you're relying on scientific ideas from decades, if not centuries, before you were born. None of what Krauss was talking about here is a miracle in any sense, because not only does it not demand supernatural causation, but in fact denies the need for any causation, supernatural or otherwise, but the concept was built on top of the currently known laws of physics. How can there be any contradiction between physical laws and a hypothesis that uses those as its foundation? And as a matter of fact, this assumption that everything has to work by the same kind of cause and effect that we perceive at the macro scale that we experience, even before the existence of any time for cause and effect to happen in, that's a religious assumption. That's why Christians and Muslims love to argue that if the universe had a beginning, it had to have a cause. And then they turn around and they posit God as that cause. They need cause and effect to always apply because otherwise they lose a bunch of their better arguments. We don't need it at all. Personally, I don't even really want it. I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that cause and effect only applies under specific circumstances. It makes explaining a godless, totally physical, totally natural universe just that much easier. So basically you're surprised that Lawrence Krauss, of all people, is not making the simplistic causal assumptions of the religious, and instead is thinking more broadly and openly in terms which defy and destroy theistic arguments. Which, if you know anything about him, which I don't think you do, seems like a really strange thing to be surprised about. Again, why do you think Krauss's book on this subject was so popular and so acclaimed among atheists? And not just atheists, but the kind of atheists who think that all there is the natural world. I can give you a hint. It is not because his arguments support the supernatural. But you know what? Now that I know that all you actually mean by a miracle is just an event that's not bound by the simplistic religious-style assumption that causation applies in all circumstances, then fine. I'll totally accept you using that word if you have to. I mean, it makes you sound really, really stupid, but that's your problem.
So, Jesus cured the blind. Oh, well, then there's no possible way that's possible because he did it supernaturally with no causal, mechanistic, material means of doing so.
Jesus Christ. Okay, quantum fluctuations causing a universe prior to the existence of space-time says nothing, absolutely nothing, about the plausibility or possibility of some guy curing the blind with magic. And more importantly, it says nothing at all about whether it's probable or actually true. Krauss was very careful. I keep saying this, but it's really important. He was very, very careful to point out that everything he proposed just then was based on known or plausible laws of physics. That also applies to spontaneous emission of a photon from an atom. On the other hand, curing the blind by spitting on some dirt and smearing it in his eye has absolutely no basis, no justification whatsoever, based on known or plausible laws of physics. Which means that if you're going to defend something like that as true, you're going to have to come up with new physics. The reason he mentions plausibility so often is that he is absolutely not saying that just anything at all can happen for no reason based on no known physical laws, anywhere, anytime, under any conditions. No, he's saying that it's plausible that one very specific thing can occur without violating the conservation of energy, and potentially without a cause as well. That does not in any way imply that any other thing you can dream up can or will happen without violating conservation of energy or without a cause. You'll note that what he's talking about is very, very specific, potentially occurring outside of space-time where the concept of cause and effect becomes total nonsense. Religious leaders don't have that luxury. If you plan to argue that an event is plausible, you have to be able to actually show that it's plausible. You can't just wave at some very specific event that may or may not be causeless and say, well, that can happen without a cause, so why can't Jesus curing the blind happen without a cause? It doesn't work that way, pal. Now, this particular hypothesis of the origin of the universe has been shown to at least be plausible, as has the spontaneous emission of photons. But you can't make the leap from those to curing the blind with spitty mud. Now, I have no interest in asserting that specific stories from the Bible never happened. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But if you're going to assert that they did, you're going to need to explain why they're plausible based on known physics if you want to have any hope at all of convincing people to take them anywhere near as seriously as they take spontaneous emission or Krauss's hypothesis on the origin of the universe.
And I'm not even a religious Christian, okay?
Okay, Jesus, man. You don't have to scream at me all the time. Triggers my PTSD.
But the point here is, mainstream science, as you'll see in the other video that explains it thoroughly, now admits our universe is a causeless fucking miracle.
Absolutely not. And not because I'm objecting to the term miracle. I already said I don't care if you use that stupid term. No, it's because mainstream science doesn't admit anything about the origins of the universe. You say that like they were withholding some information and finally admitted it. Like it's the fucking US government admitting that it's run by reptoids. But no, they don't even know themselves. Scientists are people just like you and me that can only work based on the information they have. And yeah, they've come up with some ideas that don't contradict that information, hypotheses, but they don't know. Krauss said that himself. If someone comes up to you and says, "Hello there, I'm from mainstream science and I want to tell you what the origin of the universe was," then treat them with just as much suspicion as you would any Christian who comes up and tells you that God did it.
You are a miracle! This life is a fucking spontaneous wonderland, not bound by the prison of cause and effect predeterministic mechanisms!
Okay, then let me see you make your car teleport to Mars. Come on, do it. Yeah, you starting to see the problem here?
We transcend the fucking physical reality because our physical reality came from fucking a void of nothingness with no prior cause to create it.
Right, so, you're in a physical reality, you acknowledge that. But for some reason, the origin of that physical reality affects whether or not you happen to transcend it. Whether this physical reality popped into existence from nothing, with or without a cause, or if it existed forever, or if it was handcrafted by God, it's still physical reality. You're still stuck in here with the rest of us. It doesn't matter if under some radically different condition, like before the existence of space-time, it's plausible that a universe maybe possibly could pop into existence out of nothing. And it doesn't matter if under some radically different condition, like at the level of an atom, a randomly occurring drop in the energy level can cause the release of a photon. You're not living under either of those conditions. You're not a universe. You're not outside the bounds of space-time. You're not an atom. You're not absolutely fucking minuscule. When you get worn out and feel like you don't have a lot of energy, you don't start generating giant photons from nothing. In fact, quantum weirdness has very little impact at the scale that we experience. Classical physics will allow you to do highly accurate calculations on pretty much anything you need. The reason we have the concept of cause and effect, the reason we have the concept of classical physics, the reason the religious tend to cling to such things so desperately, even when discussing hypothetical situations where they really shouldn't apply, is that in the world as we experience it, things really do work that way. And you know it. When you turn on your light switch, it's not random whether your light bulb's going to turn on. Turning on the switch causes the bulb to turn on. Whether the light bulb works through spontaneous emission is irrelevant. You have no need to worry that it's going to turn into a fish and eat you alive for no reason. Just because, I don't know, quantum something. And you should be damn glad, because in a world where cause and effect don't reign supreme, it's a world of madness. Now, I'm not particularly interested in puzzling through whether there really is a cause for seemingly random quantum effects, like spontaneous emission. My point is that regardless of cause or no cause, they don't cause cult leaders to be able to spit on mud, rub it on eyes, and cure someone who's blind from birth. They do very specific and well-understood things. If you really want to find a way to prove that Jesus magically cured a blind guy, or even if that was possible or even plausible, then you're going to have to do way better than waving your hands about some statement about spontaneous emission by some guy on the Joe Rogan podcast and saying, see, that can happen, so Jesus' stuff can too. No, you still have your burden of proof. Get to it.
It's a fucking miracle! Our universe is a literal fucking miracle! Do you realize how exciting that fucking is?
Can't be that exciting. You're really not selling me on the idea that you're excited. You seem kind of bored. Maybe you should try cranking your enthusiasm up another couple notches. That should do it.
We no longer live in this dead, we're just a bunch of fucking biological robots lumbering around mindlessly.
No, actually, you're exactly the same thing you were yesterday, which is a biological robot. How exactly would the causelessness of the universe, or the causelessness of spontaneous emission of photons, or the existence of tons of other causeless events change that? Whether a universe originated without a cause says absolutely nothing about whether causation exists inside of it, which, as I say, every indication is that it does, at least as far as the things that happen on the macro scale are concerned. But hell, even if, let's just grant your premise entirely, if every single thing that happens anywhere, including inside your brain, is completely causeless, and this is the part you're going to hate, you're still just a sack of meat being dragged around by the whims of the laws of physics. The only thing that changes under those circumstances is that those laws of physics include unpredictable events. Unpredictable is not the same as controllable by you. If the nature of matter and energy is unpredictable, that doesn't change the fact that matter and energy reign supreme over you, and you don't reign supreme over them. You'd still be shackled, completely and permanently, against your will, to the function of the universe. You still wouldn't be able to change the fact that you are matter and energy do what they're gonna do, regardless of your opinion, whether what they do has a cause or not. Your big, incredible, misguided realization here hasn't caused your shackles to drop off. Even if it's true, all it does is slightly change their color.
We're not just lumbering robots in a purely dead physical reality, just going predeterministically against our will.
That's true. We'd be lumbering robots in a purely dead physical reality going non-predeterministically against our will. Wonderful! Chris, whether your thoughts are generated by caused actions of matter and energy or uncaused ones, you're not going to be able to psychically cause the universe to do something different. Sure, some things some of the particles do will be uncaused. Well, so what? The effect on you is still the exact same. You can't choose not to be impacted by what the universe does. You're still part of it. You're still stuck in the system, even if the system just randomly does random shit from time to time, which I have to say would get really goddamn annoying after a while.
Reality is a spontaneous wonderland of fucking amazing miracles. And the so-called pro-science community, and this isn't even an attack on science. It's an attack on physicalism.
Is it? How? Physicalism is the belief that everything that exists is physical. A photon is a physical thing, whether or not the event that caused it to be emitted was caused itself. And a universe is physical, whether or not it had a cause. Nothing you've said so far has even hinted at a refutation of physicalism. None of it had anything at all to do with physicalism.
And half the people, these atheists who claim to be pro-science, they're really just physicalists.
Well, if you can show them something demonstrated scientifically that's non-physical, I'm sure they'll change their minds. Since you haven't bothered to try to do that here, though, even despite your claim that you're attacking physicalism, well, I guess you just don't care that much.
I'm not against science. I'm against the religion of physicalism.
Oh, it's a religion now. Not just a philosophical position on the nature of the universe, but a whole religion with all the sacred things and rituals and morals and externally imposed purpose and all that shit. You know, I've never really been one for religion, but I want to get in on this. Is there some kind of a book I can read to get the basics, like how I'm supposed to pray and so on?
That says we are pointless, predeterministic, biological robots in an unimpressive universe.
Ah, now I see the problem. You're not really worried about whether something's factually true or false. You're just worried about whether it makes you feel like the universe is meaningful and impressive. Well, a causeless origin of the universe might do that for you, but not really for very good reasons, but I'll tell you one thing it definitely won't do. It won't make the universe give any more of a fuck about how you feel than it already does. Cause or no cause, physical or non-physical, reality is not subject to your precious little feels, snowflake.
Because what's so impressive about a predeterministic reality? You know what impresses me? Miracles!
Uh-huh. Well, hey, cool then. You've heard one random scientist talk about how there are plausible ways that things might happen without a cause, and you've labeled that a miracle, even though that's not what that word means, and now you're totally happy about being a biological robot in a totally physical universe. Awesome, dude. I'm not even kidding. I'm glad to see you're so easily satisfied. I mean, man, if I thought I could make the religious people accept reality that easily, I'd relabel everything however the hell they wanted just to suit them. I'm perfectly willing to learn a new language if it means religion goes away.
The universe popping from nothing. The entire universe arising from nothing with no prior cause. That's fucking impressive. That's fucking exciting. Okay?
Well, I'll agree with you on that. If it's true, it is impressive and exciting. All on its own. We don't have to pretend like it means the universe that resulted from it contains magic people going around fixing eyeballs with spit mud. And we don't need to call it supernatural, and we don't have to call it a miracle. It's perfectly impressive and exciting enough all by itself. And by the way, you act as if the concept of a human being being a biological robot is so unimpressive as to be almost mundane. But how is that not impressive and exciting as well? Your brain, deeply flawed though it may be, is not something boring that you can shrug at. In uncharitable terms, a human being may indeed be a lumbering robot, but that's no reason to dismiss it as something dull and unimpressive. That lumbering robot required billions of years of natural laws influencing a storm of frenetic activity that resulted in life arising on Earth and spreading and thriving and dramatically changing in an ultra-complex web of life. That's not dull. Nothing in the universe is dull. Everything in the universe has a long and fascinating story. Much longer and more fascinating, in fact, than the minuscule instant of the universe's origin, whether it was caused or not. By focusing so much on that one tiny little thing, and then brushing off all the amazing things that have been happening ever since as just a dead physical universe with a few lumbering robots in it, just because you're sad that you don't have a very good argument for libertarian free will, even though you have every sensation of having free will anyway, so who cares? By doing that, you're doing yourself a huge disservice.
So we are miracles, and we should wake up every day just like springy with energy.
Yes! And if you hadn't been ignoring the whole universe this whole time and pissing and moaning about how boring it is, you would have already been doing that. Because not only is the universe amazing, but so is the fact that by a fantastically improbable roll of the dice, you got to experience it. For this tiny amount of time, you actually get to see all of this. Whether you're a physical, biological robot or some kind of spooky ghost, your experiences are still experiences. You've still used your senses and taken in all that information and processed it, and you can still wonder at it. You still feel your consciousness. That's what this process inside of your head does. Robot or ghost, the result is exactly the same, and how it's achieved is irrelevant. Marvel at the universe, man. Not for what you wish it would be, but for what it is. You've only got a few decades left to do it in. Enjoy it.
Because the same physicalists who for decades said, we live in a dead, meaningless universe.
Who? What depressed, miserable fuck said that? Look around you. The universe is far from dead. This planet is swarming with life. What life is, how life works, is irrelevant. It's life. From your perspective, it's the same thing, no matter what it is. Biological robots, spooky ghosts, computer simulations, who cares? Why would you discount life as even being alive, just because its fundamental nature displeases you? Oh, dictator of what is best in the universe. Why do you hate life that, in its fundamental nature, doesn't perfectly match your exacting specifications? Why can't you just like it for what it is? Get excited about reality on reality's terms. And as for meaninglessness, are you kidding me? You're free. You're no one's slave. Nobody's dictating your meaning to you. That's a wonderful thing. Yes, you operate according to the laws of physics, absolutely. And they don't operate according to your will. You're stuck doing what the universe does. But suck it up and deal with it, whine ass. It doesn't mean you feel any different, you still feel free. That's the nature of the process you are. You feel exactly the same now as you would if your mind was not physical. It makes literally no difference. When you decide that you want to have a specific meaning in your life, when you decide that you want to do something specific, the fact that your brain that made that decision is controlled by the laws of physics doesn't mean anything. The process that is you still wanted to do it. The process that is you still wishes for that meaning. Wishes and wants emerge from the physical properties and the physical process inside of your brain. Your wishes and your wants are real. You don't control the fundamental physics that underlie your universe, but the process that is you is still what creates the wishes and the wants. You create them. You and the process are not distinct things, and any sense of meaning that emerges from that process is just as real as any meaning imposed on you from outside, except it's actually yours. It's your decision, not some outside force's decision. A decision that came from the very essence of yourself, not from someone else. Yes, if things physically happened a different way, you would probably want something else. Your mind would do something different. But that doesn't mean that you don't actually want what you want. It doesn't mean that it's not your will. It is your will. The decisions of that process are your will. That's what your will is. The only problem you're having here is that you don't control reality at every possible level. You can't alter physics to suit you. You can't alter logic to suit you. Well, it would be nice to be a fucking wizard, but you can't always get what you want. And you'd probably be a hell of a lot happier if you could accept that and learn to be happy with what you actually are. You still exist. You can still make decisions. Your wishes and your dreams and feelings and thoughts all come from you. Everything that could possibly be called you is creating those things. It's just that you're not a god in control of the fundamental nature of reality. Poor little you. You want to cry about it? You have a very rare opportunity here. The vast majority of the people who potentially could have seized the opportunities that you have never got to live to even have the chance to do it in the first place. Learn to appreciate that you feel free and define your meaning for yourself. If you feel the same either way, why would you prefer to be a ghost who has your meaning dictated to you by someone else than a robot who can dictate your own meaning to yourself? Stop working so hard to impose meaninglessness on your own life by refusing to define its meaning for yourself, and you'll feel much better, I promise. And if that doesn't work, try booze. One really nice side benefit of having a physical brain is that chemical intoxicants actually work.
Now they've been forced to admit through their own scientific discoveries, at least according to Lawrence Krauss and his plausible worldview about where the universe came from, our reality sprung out of nothing with no prior cause spontaneously.
Oh, now it's Lawrence Krauss. Okay. So, do you actually know what the word plausible means? I mean, you understand the fact that he said it's plausible, but then you go on to assert that scientists have been forced to admit that reality actually did spring out of nothing with no prior cause. And you're so excited about it, you're jumping off the walls. Dude, plausible means it doesn't contradict what we know so far, but we don't know if it's actually true or even probable. Look, I perfectly understand being interested in new hypotheses that could go somewhere. They're part of the advancement of our scientific understanding, and they're interesting. But you're talking about something that could just as easily be completely false as it could be true. Oh, and also, even if it were completely true, it's not like Lawrence Krauss was forced to admit anything. Does it seem like Krauss is squirming in his seat about the implications of this hypothesis on physicalism? No. Of course not. Listen to him. He's almost as excited to talk about it as you are. And that's not only because it has zero implications for physicalism, but also because, if it's true, it makes physicalism more likely by removing the need for any supernatural intervention in the origin of the universe. It removes the need for the supernatural because the only way you would need the supernatural is if you need a cause. A supernatural cause. Didn't you notice him pointing that out?
Then the possibility that it comes from nothing becomes plausible. Because if it doesn't, you may need a deity to create everything. And any time you can get rid of God, it's a good thing.
The guy's like a kid before Christmas. He's jumping out of his seat at the opportunity to tell Joe Rogan this idea that totally eliminates any need for the supernatural, while also fulfilling the request of the religious for a way that the universe could have been created from nothing without it.
The definition of a fucking miracle. That's a fucking definition of supernatural.
Miracle, noun. A surprising and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore considered to be the work of a divine agency. Supernatural, adjective, of a manifestation or event attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. So, nope, it's exactly not the definition of a miracle. Everything Krauss talked about were guesses based entirely on our current scientific understanding and natural laws. Prior to the Big Bang, space-time didn't exist, so causation is a nonsensical concept. Quantum fluctuations caused a zero-energy universe to come into existence, thus not violating energy conservation, but creating what we see around us. And none of that is inexplicable through current science, as you damn well should have been able to figure out from the fact that it was created entirely based on the framework of current science. Nothing miraculous, nothing supernatural, in the slightest. At least if you want to play the definitions game.
We live in an exciting supernatural universe, man! This shit is fucking exciting, guys.
So, now that we're close to the end, let me ask you a question. Theists have proposed for ages that the universe has to have a cause, and that cause had to be that there was a god who decided to make it. But here you are, seemingly bored and depressed by the idea of a universe that was caused by something. So do you reject the idea of a causal creation of the universe by God on the basis that that's not exciting too? I ask because I glanced at your other video on this subject while I was working on this one, and you talk a little bit of shit about atheists there, as if you're not one yourself.
Let's give atheists the credit they deserve.
Which I guess isn't surprising, considering how emotionally invested and intellectually uninvested you are in the idea of miracles. I don't know, you're kind of confusing is all I'm saying. I'm not sure if I'll take a look at your other video, because you do say some new things there, but you also repeat yourself an awful lot, just without the hilarious squealing and voice cracks.
Double rainbow. Oh my god. It's a
Supernatural universe, man!
Whoa! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh,
That's fucking exciting!
Fucking rainbows. After it rains, there's enough miracles here to blow your brains.
But speaking of hilarious squeals, that's what I do every single time someone supports me on Patreon. It's really a sight to witness. All of my Patreon people are very appreciated, and I cannot stress that enough, especially while this YouTube AdSense debacle is going on. As most of you already know, most YouTubers, myself included, rely very heavily on ad revenue, and that's now severely at risk thanks to mainstream media hit pieces driving away hundreds of major advertisers, which then seemingly also scared YouTube into drastically broadening its criteria for videos it deems unmonetizable due to being advertiser unfriendly. So basically, both from the advertiser front and the YouTube front, things are looking pretty grim. I'm not quite sure how my channel is going to wind up as a result of these changes. I haven't been hit very hard so far. Here's how my analytics look for the last 28 days. Now, in recent days, it doesn't look that great, but I also haven't been uploading as many videos, and that new spike on the last day is the 12-minute video that I uploaded on April 3rd. That video had a mid-roll ad, which helps a lot with making a video more profitable, but it's also a short video, and short videos never get as much money. So this is more or less where I would expect it to be. So I'm not sure why, but I might be just fine. I've had a couple videos demonetized, but not a whole lot so far. But, of course, YouTube's still rolling out the changes, so I'm fairly nervous about how that's going to look in a couple of weeks. Could be an unfounded fear, I don't know. Hopefully. Either way, this whole scenario kind of annoys me. I mean, there's so much uncertainty and nervousness about whether I'm going to be able to pay the bills next month, and I only started doing this full-time a month ago, and it actually went really well for the first month. I was very happy about it, and now it's looking like I couldn't have picked a worse time to do it. I want to tell you, if you're subscribed to the Wall Street Journal, just do everyone on this website a favor and unsubscribe from them. Give that money to your favorite YouTuber on Patreon, whoever that happens to be. Doesn't have to be me, but if it is, of course I'll be very grateful. But really, I just want that money to stay with YouTubers and not with the fucking Wall Street Journal. For a lot of us here on YouTube, even just a tiny contribution from each of our viewers means the difference between being able to do it as a job and having the time to continue putting out high quality videos at a high rate, instead of job hunting, working full time, and putting out out videos much more rarely. And so soon after I started, the thought of that is unbelievably discouraging. So all I'm saying is, instead of supporting these big corporations who are trying to destroy people's livelihoods in a desperate struggle to regain some other lost relevance, consider supporting the individuals who took the risk to come on this platform, put in the time, put in the effort, just so they can get by and entertain you in the process. Most of us aren't rich, we're not gigantic corporations, we're just people like you who are kind of stuck in a shit situation right now. Sorry, I don't mean to sound like I'm whining, but it does grind on you a little bit, you understand. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Even if all you do is watch my videos, it really means a lot that you get some value out of what I have to say. I really hope that my experiment here won't end as abruptly as it started. And if you want to see more videos, subscribe and thumb up this video, and I will see you soon.